Right, WFG listeners, as I said at the very beginning, this is the fourth Monday of the month. And so what we've been doing is a series in collaboration with the Building and Construction Trades Council. And if you've been listening in the past, you know that the first time we did this with a trade union to talk about their apprenticeship program, the kinds of benefits it meant to be a union construction worker, was with the IBEW. Then that's the Electrical Workers Union. And then we had a session and a program with the operating engineers. Those are the people that operate all the big equipment. And then we had a session with the iron workers. Those are the folks that are constructing, you know, the skeleton. I'll use that, this iron skeleton of many tall buildings. Today we have Steve Henson with us. He is the executive director of the Laborers Southeast Training Fund, and the union that he represents is the is the Laborers, LIU, Laborers International Union, LIU. And Steve also wears a second hat, and we will talk about that a little bit later. Some of you will say, "Oh, that's my senator." Okay. And we're going to talk a little bit later, after we talk about what laborers do and what the Laborers International Union does. We're going to talk a little bit about what happened at the state legislature this year that was good for workers and maybe was not so good for workers with Steve. So we'll hope you stay tuned for the entire hour. This will go till just a little bit before 5. So on behalf of the Labor Forum, welcome Steve Henson.
Hey, great to be here.
So surprise, surprise, this was Steve's first visit to WRFG, and yeah, we're kind of surprised about that.
Wow, I'm glad to be invited, and glad to be invited for the hat I wear training people for the Laborers Union. It's a great job trying to help people get employment and be able to develop their skills where they can contribute and make a good living. So honored to be here.
Well, good enough. Well, we start off this interview because all three of us first want to know what it is that we want to know some history about the Laborers Union. We want to know what work the folks who are in the union do. So take it away.
Oh, well, you had that history lesson a little bit ago, and it made me kind of reminisce, you know, so maybe I'll go back a little further than I had planned to. But the Laborers Union was formed in 1903, where about 17 different unions around the country got together, and around that time Samuel Gompers and others tried to get all the unions to unite into bigger groups, because there were a lot of independent unions all over the country. So the Laborers Union was formed, and it was called the Hod Carriers Union, and hod carriers and building tradesmen. So it was a basic craft and construction skills. It was the people who helped bricklayers, hod carriers, bricklaying, helped, developed to help, where they helped carpenters and electricians and other crafts on the job, as well as develop their own niche in construction industry, including demolition that they do today, pipe laying, which are the major craft on pipelines, and that sort of thing. So although the International Union does do a lot of different things, where one of our subgroup is the Mail Handlers Union. About 50,000 members of the 500,000 members of the Laborers Union are mail handlers. But also we have here in Atlanta, the local union represents some visiting nurses, has represented some people, Agnes Scott, in the past. So it's represented diverse industries and groups. Most building trades have some other members that are not in the building trades, but our primary focus is the building trades, and myself in the construction side, training side of it, is the construction industry. So we do a lot of training for people in general construction skills, like pouring concrete or forming, carpentry help in forming concrete, forms and that sort of thing. But we also do a lot of environmental work. We do a lot of work at Plant Mobile in the construction and maintenance of that, and we do a lot of work at Savannah River site, which goes over the line in South Carolina. So we do a lot of environmental work, like training people to remove asbestos or remove lead or hazardous waste worker training, that sort of thing. So those are the kind of areas that we work in. And a little background, and like I say, in 1903, a lot of people got tired of not having benefits, not being protected when employers wanted to not pay them a fair living, and been fighting for that ever since. In the 60s, we started developing funds to provide training for people. So the training funds were started in the late 60s and now are very critically important to our union. And around the 60s and 70s are when health and welfare funds to provide health care benefits started for workers in the building trades, and that's still important to us, is the pension program for workers, so that once they work their 30 years out in construction, they can continue to live a decent life.
That's great. That's great. And so unions are really beneficial to people. So people have to understand that unions are really kind of like the backbone of us getting treated fairly on jobs.
Absolutely. And so many people have a misunderstanding of unions, or they think somehow it takes away from them. Actually, unions help build up wages for the people who are not in unions. If you've got to pay somebody $20 to go build construction jobs or work there, then that's competing with other markets. So non-union workers benefit by their wages going up, as well as the fact that the union workers, if you see them out there working on a job, they have health insurance. And that means when they get hurt, they're not going on there uninsured to the hospital, where all of us in society has to help pick up the cost.
Right.
So they're having benefit plans like that help society, because they don't take advantage of the system in other ways, like be uninsured in the healthcare industry. And of course, they have some pensions, so once they retire, they can continue to contribute to the economy.
Yes, I just want the people who are listening to understand that unions are for the benefit of working people.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
they always have been, in my view.
That's absolutely right, and it's really a shame. Over the years, big corporations have often, try to malign unions. If there's one crooked union official, you hear about it 100 times. And in any industry, there's crooked people that work in management, but any industry you're going to see people mess up.
Yeah.
But really, the union industry has been a real fundamental bedrock of the middle class in this country, and the fact that unions have slipped over the last 20 years is just one of the reasons why we see our middle class shrinking and wage disparity getting so big that it's threatening the health of this country. So I'd love to see unions grow stronger,
Oh, yeah.
and we'd love to see more people be involved and learn about unions and what effect they have on our economy.
Right.
Why do you think it is that growth of unions isn't as big in the South as in other parts of the country?
Yeah, that's, as we developed, one reason unions came along in 1903 was the old major industry, which was agriculture, was getting moved aside as we became a more industrial society, and more people were living in cities, and other type of industries developed. And one of those big industries today is the service industry, and that's hard to organize because they're small little groups of people, 10 or 15 or 20 people, and if you withhold your work, people will go somewhere else. Back in the 50s and 60s, when you had large factories and large employers, if people struck or withheld their work, they had real economic power. So it's harder as things get to smaller scale in the economy. And as far as construction unions, they've suffered largely because when people don't have unions in their area, sometimes they're jealous of union workers and not supportive of them. In the old days, if they were going to build a plant for AT&T, which CWA is organized, they would make sure they build it union. Nowadays, they may have less concern because those union workers may have less clout in the company. So, all the car plants in the country were union at one time. They were all built union. Today, you look at the Kia plant, it's not union, and a lot of the work was done not union as far as building the plant. So, it's just one of those things. It's a struggle. It's a never-ending struggle. It's like much of the economy's hopefully cyclic, and it'll come back as people realize that the disparity between rich and poor is not good for the country, and people need to make sure their economically rewarded for their work.
Well, I'm just gonna throw a little bit in here. It's about the placement of right-to-work laws in the South,
Yes.
and, which was a direct anti-union move. And it also reflects the fear, very frankly, in my opinion, of a united workforce, meaning people of all nationalities, races, and genders. So that right to work allows a corporate head to play one group of workers against another group of workers. They can pick favorites, they can pay somebody more, and they can pay somebody less, they can fire at will. And so it allows them to create division. And so what a union does, its key word is solidarity. Its key word is solidarity, and the whole slogan of one for all and all for one, and those kinds of sentiments. And so that gets rid of these racist divisions, these sexist divisions, these homophobic divisions, these anti-foreigner divisions, all these divisions that are created to keep working people apart. So, I'm just, now that I've said all that.
But that was good. The right to work laws are a barrier, and as we developed in the South, you would have seen in 1970, building trades unions would have been a lot stronger here in Atlanta. They would have never been as strong as New York or Chicago, because we had the right to work law, and because a lot of our economy was lower income, developing from agriculture. But we have suffered over the last 40 years because of the right to work law and a concentrated effort to
Because it's really a right to work for less law. We should really call it what it is.
Well, and it's kind of law that you couldn't pass for something else. If you want to be a lawyer, you got to be pretty much a member of the state bar. Most doctors know that they benefit being associated with the Medical Association of Georgia. They have their own groups and unions and associations, but yet they pass laws that say, you don't have to pay dues, but the union still has to represent you if you belong. They can't make you pay dues and things like that. And there's really a lot of unfairness going on that people, can't see unless they look closely at it.
Right.
I saw a lot of that fear that, Diane was talking about down in Jackson, Mississippi, going to help organize workers in Nissan around, trying to get unions into that Nissan plant in Jackson. And the fear was, and the division that they caused between the workers. You've had family members, maybe 10, 15 family members worked at this plant in Jackson, Mississippi, and they were just split down the middle.
Yeah.
And fighting.
And it's a little different than it was back in the 40s and 50s. I think people are a lot just more connected in their communities and their families than they are today. So many people, they move away from home. They don't live with a close knit, large, extended family like they used to. So that makes it harder too to stick together. To not, back in the 50s, half your family members were in a town. They went on strike, you went on strike.
Yeah.
They were your family members. Now you may not know anybody else in the community. You go in your house every night, you turn on your TV, you watch TV shows, you play the computer, and you don't have that kind of connection and that solidarity. So people need to go out there, and that's one of the positive things I think about some of this engagement that's been going on in the public arena in the last few years. Hopefully, people get a sense of purpose and the need to do something.
Because we are all in this together. So.
Yep.
So Steve, could you explain more about what the Laborers Southeast Training Fund is?
Absolutely. The Labor Southeast Training Fund, and this is true with most of the building trades in the 60s and 70s and on, have developed mechanisms to make sure our union workers are the best workers there are. So we have a program developed to train our workers in different skills, and there's apprenticeship programs associated with that, and there's just skill development training classes.
Can you give some examples of those skills?
Sure. We have a great deal of classes in the environmental area, classes like asbestos abatement, where you have to have a license if you're on a job. We provide that training, rad worker training, hazardous waste worker training, but we also do training on excavation, on how to dig a trench safely for pipeline work. We train people how to pour concrete. You might think it's easy, but if you go out there and you don't know how much water to mix with the concrete or what the slump is, which is the moisture consistency, you won't get it done right. So vibrating concrete, how to build forms and that sort of thing, how to properly do demolition. We teach people how to do oxygen acetylene cutting and propane cutting and demolition work. So we run classes for each of those things. And most of those classes are where the contractor that we have a contract with will call us and say, I've got a job coming up. I'm going to need 20 people that can cut for demolition of this factory. And the local union will let us know about it, or the contractor will directly, and we'll put a class on and inform our members of that work coming up and what kind of training can be prepared for them. If we don't have enough workers, sometimes we'll recruit new people and they'll come into our apprenticeship program, get training, and then go out as an apprentice. So it's interesting. You're always seeing different people, and you're always hopeful that they're going to complete the training and be successful and go to work and earn a good living. So those are some of the areas that we do training.
Okay, I want to get a little more into the good living, wages and stuff. So every contract that a union has is negotiated, and they can be different. But for the most part, to the listeners, every union contract is going to have things about health and safety on the job. It's going to have something about your wage scale, and then it's not arbitrary. It's going to have something about vacations and health care and a variety of other things. So I'm going to ask Steve, exactly in a laborer's union contract, what are all those things?
Well, I am in the training arm, so I don't negotiate the contracts. But we do, the local here in Georgia, and there's locals all over the United States and Canada. The locals here in Georgia represent all of the state, main office here in Atlanta represents all the state of Georgia and South Carolina. It has about 1,500 members and has dozens of contracts with different employers. But in general, the wage you take home is usually a little under $20 an hour, let's say $17, $18 an hour. And there are in that contract benefits paid so that you have a training fund, so that you will have a pension when you retire, and that you can get health benefits. So for every hour you work, a certain amount of money would be taken out, maybe as much as $4 an hour would be taken out, so it could go to health insurance, so that you'd have a good health insurance plan for your family. And that would come out of your base. That's above what I mentioned for wages. And some money would be taken out for a pension fund, etc. So at the end of the day, you're not only providing some money to buy food, you also have that health insurance, and when you get ready, hopefully, to survive that long, to get able to retire, you have some money coming in, because we know Social Security doesn't provide a adequate living for folks.
But can I ask specifically about how does health and safety work on the job? And so, for example, I was an auto worker, so we had people who were health and safety people. And so if there were issues with any kind of, the equipment or something like that, they also went to classes, and they were kept trained on all the toxic chemicals and other dangerous things that existed in the plant, and they provided information to us. We had to have protective gear, personal protective gear, glasses and gloves and all that. So how does that transfer to a construction site?
Well, first of all, one thing we do in the training is we let them know about what protective gear they might need in certain conditions, also material safety data sheets, what should be given to them on a job. But then they would go to the business manager or the representatives with the local union and say, hey, for instance, this person is making me go up on scaffolding, there's no handrail, there's no guardrails, I know it's not safe, what do I do? Well, if you're not in a union job, you have really only one choice. You
do it or get fired.
Pretty much quit or do what they tell you to do. You can call OSHA in the meantime and report it, but those are really your choices. Either not do it or do it. If you don't do it, you get fired. On a union job, you have someone to call. You have your labor consultant, your business manager, who can come out there, demand that the situation be corrected, or that there'll be an action like a strike, or they'll get their lawyers involved. So that's really what the benefit of the local is, that you've got those experts not only negotiating a contract where you get wages increased every couple of years or every year or what have you, but you also get those kind of protections on the job. If for instance, you get fired, just because somebody comes in with a bad attitude that day and they fire you for no reason, that can happen on an ununion job. Basically you can fire somebody because their hair is a little too long, and that's your reason, that's legal, that's justified. But, in this situation, with the union, you have some protections. I've had a lot of people come to me recently, some employers who without unions are saying, making you sign a contract that the day you're terminated, any money still owed you, they're only gonna pay you at minimum wage.
What?
Whatever money's owed you. A union contract would preclude that kind of thing from happening. But, there's a lot of things that the union can help people with, but those are some of them.
Steve, in terms of, I was reading some of the history, as far back as 1920, on the website it says that African American trade unionists were seen as equals in the laborers union, and coming through the civil rights era, and the vice president of the union was a founding member of the A. Philip Randolph Institute, marching with Dr. King in 1963. So coming forward to today, and with some of the history of the building trades, how have the laborers dealt with questions of diversity?
Yeah, well, I mean, probably all the building trades at some time, at some places, have had strife and some problems with race relations, and we shouldn't sweep that under the table or say it didn't happen and hasn't happened. But by and large, the laborers union has been, it was formed in 1903, and it was primarily Italians, Germans, Poles. It was the basic craft of the construction job. They had the nastiest work, demolition. Back then you didn't have respirators. You pulled out stuff that killed you. It was a tough job, and so it was brought with immigrants, and it has always been kind of welcoming to minorities and immigrants and such. So that's kind of the history of the organization. So as the civil rights movement came, we were one of the first ones that tried to make sure. I've seen contracts from my father was a labor leader before me. He was a national president during the Stone Cutters Union, and he was the regional manager for the laborers union. And I've seen contracts from the 20s and 30s where they had separate wage rates for colored workers as they were in contract to the white workers. We were one of the first unions to prevent that from happening and outlawing that. And in Georgia, the laborers union is very diverse, probably 75% minority, a high percentage of women as far as building trades, probably 30% or near in female participation. So we're proud of that, and we highlight that, and it's helped make us an effective and strong voice, I think.
What about the issue of undocumented workers that we know a lot of Latinos have been in the construction industry?
Well, we organize people by getting contracts with employers. So they have to follow the same laws as other employers, and whatever those are as far as making sure somebody is able and legal to go to work. But the laborers union has been a force trying to make sure we try to make some improvements on the laws that have not been addressed in the federal government about immigration, about making sure that undocumented workers have a transition to legal citizenship. And so we've been a big supporter of national and a progressive voice for workers. Some workers out there say, who cares? But by having these workers who are in that undocumented category, people often pay them little money, take advantage of them, and that depresses the pay for all workers. So we need to make sure we get people out of the shadow, make sure that we have a pathway to citizenship for those that are working here and are contributing to our economy, and bring them out of light and make sure they're fairly treated.
And those are the workers that we haven't seen these stories lately, I don't think, but construction site cave-ins, you can see that happen with people who are on, and I would assume, non-union work sites.
Well, I mean, there are people hurt on union jobs, but you're right. Most of the union employers, if they've been organized and they're trying to do the job legally, they're not going to have many issues with safety. They try to obey the safety rules and regs. And companies that come in and would hire people off the books, pay people cash, so they don't list them as employees, they list them as independent contractors. You know, companies that are skirting the law in that regard, you'll also find skirting the law as far as the proper way to do the work, you know, proper shoring and trenches and other things. So you'll find those contractors that are skirting the laws in some areas tend to continue doing it and be the ones where most people are hurt and injured. And sometimes they don't even pay their work comp benefits. So, or like I say, improperly have them as independent contractors, so they do get hurt, they get no help.
They don't get nothing.
Yeah.
So if one of our listeners out there, or maybe 5 or 10 or 20, are interested in knowing more about whether they could register and join the laborers union, or if there is an apprenticeship program and some of this training that you discussed, how would they get to do it? Would you have telephone numbers or emails or websites or Facebook?
Yeah, I do. They could, if they're interested, we do have an apprenticeship program, by the way. Right now in Atlanta, you know, when you have new people, you bring people in the apprenticeship program. Our work is pretty stable. We are hoping that some pipelines get in the Atlanta area, so we might be looking at this fall. Workers that have a lot of construction experience already, they may not have to go through the apprenticeship program. They may just be able to document that they've worked in construction, and they should come by the local union hall, and it's on Edgewood Avenue here in Atlanta. Or they could call me at the training school and get more information. My number is 678-937-1654. Steve Henson at Laborers Training Center.
Say their number one more time.
678-937-1654. And we have just yesterday we had some apprentices that we took in the Augusta area for work over at Savannah River project and for the Plant Vogel. So don't know how far out your radio signal goes, but yeah, we are getting some new people in those areas, and of course things always change. So feel free to check in, or just Google, you know, Laborers Local 515. That covers Georgia and South Carolina. That's Laborers Local 515, and the phone number for the local union is there. The business manager is Pedro Franco.
I want to thank Steve Henson, who is the executive director of the, let me get it exactly right, putting glasses on, Laborers Southeast Training Fund, for all the information that he provided you and us here at the Labor Forum on what it is that the laborers union members do and how you can become part of it. And we really encourage anybody who's interested to take advantage of the information that Steve gave. And we thank him so much for coming today to do that.
Thank you so much.